Waycross presents an election forum for the Ohio State Representative for the 28th District. There are two candidates running for one open seat. The candidates are, in alphabetical order, Jessica E. Miranda, Chris Monzel.
Welcome to another Waycross election forum. This forum is for state representative of the 28th District. I'm Dana Gagnon, Government Programming Coordinator for Waycross Community Media, and I have here in the studio with me Hunter Ellis, who is a student at Xavier University.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So glad to be here.
Now we have in our studio today the candidates Jessica Miranda and Chris Monzel. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to start with the candidates' 2 minutes opening statement. But before we do that, I want to say that if you are watching live on October 1st, you will be able to participate in this program by emailing in your questions. Now, if you are watching live, the email address will show up on your screen. It will be live@waycross.org. There are a couple rules. When you send in your email, please include your name, your street address, and your community. We will only use your first name and your community on the air, but we do need the other information to make sure we're getting real questions from real people in the community. Questions must be phrased for both candidates, not targeted at one candidate. We do reserve the right to rephrase a question to make sure that it meets these rules. And of course, for time purposes, we may have to shorten questions or rephrase questions as we go. Just be aware of that. So I think we're ready to get started with 2-minute opening statements. And we will start alphabetically. Jessica, we're going to start with you, and feel free to start whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, first and foremost, thank you to Waycross Media, Dana, and the whole crew here, especially all of the volunteers who are here tonight, volunteering your time to put this together. You do an amazing job, and I thank you for it. My name is Jessica Miranda, and I am your state representative for Ohio's 28th House District. I am running for re-election to continue to work for you here in the Great 28, which consists of 13 total municipalities, including Forest Park, Green Hills, and Pleasant Run Farms. As a lifelong Southwest Ohio resident, I now proudly reside in Forest Park, where my husband and I own and operate our small business, and where my 3 daughters attend public school. Go Warriors. I am the former Winton Woods School Board President, where I served for 5 years. During that time, I was proud to increase transparency, implement project and problem-based learning to create a new curriculum, making Winton Woods the second district in the entire nation that teaches this way pre-K through 12th grade, and produced the largest economic development our communities have seen, creating hundreds of jobs, benefiting our local economy, and strengthening property values, building 2 state-of-the-art school facilities. As a mom, small business owner, and former school board president, I have a wide range of experience that allows me to represent families in the 20th District. In my first year and 9 months in office, I have worked on common sense legislation in my caucus and across the aisle to achieve real results for families, to protect from senseless deaths from gun violence, honor and support our first responders, increase funding to local and government, which is huge, and fight for fair and adequate school funding. And also, if I can quickly get it in there, bring transparency to corruption and bribery in Ohio by getting dark money out of politics. So amidst this pandemic, I have worked to provide support and relief to all Ohioans, and I am excited for this opportunity. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So now, Chris, it's time for your 2-minute opening statement.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Dana, and thank you, Waycross Media, for this opportunity. I look forward to answering your questions tonight in order to tell you about my goals for the State House, as well as representing all the residents of District 28. I love District 28. I grew up here. I went to school here. I've worked here. I've raised my family here. This is my home. And this election is critical to the families and businesses in our communities. We've seen firsthand over the last 6 months just how impactful state government has been in our daily lives, from our healthcare, to our jobs, to our children's schools, education, sports, to our senior citizens, to our families and businesses. That is why this election is so important. This election provides a clear choice for the future of District 28 and for all of Ohio. Most people know my dedication to public service, and most recently I was your Hamilton County Commissioner. During that time, I've established a proven track record of bipartisan accomplishments. You should know that I am pro-family, pro-jobs, pro-safety, and law enforcement, and you can't have one without the other. I will bring common sense solutions to the issues that are important to District 28, from jobs and getting people back to work and reopening Ohio, to education and making sure our schools are successful, to public safety and keeping our community safe, because every community deserves to be safe. My opponent, however, supports organizations that have violent protests that have destroyed our communities and supports defunding the police. And she goes far as saying on her Facebook page that blue lives don't exist. What a disparaging, divisive, and disrespectful comment to the women and men who every day put their lives on the line for our communities. And during the final vote for the most corrupt and scandalous $6 billion House Bill 6 energy bailout, my opponent was a no-show. She didn't show up. She didn't do her job. It was a dereliction of duty. District 28 had no voice. So the choice is clear. My opponent has been ineffective, divisive, and absent. I'll provide strong leadership for District 28. My experience track record shows that, and I will show up and I will fight for you. Thank you.
So just to get us started here, we're going to go ahead and ask a question this time. We're going to start with you, Chris.
Okay.
What do you think the top issue is facing Ohio today? You have 2 minutes to answer this question.
So absolutely, the whole coronavirus pandemic and trying to get people back to work, getting back to their daily lives, and making sure that people are staying safe. We've seen a tremendous amount of businesses and families that have been impacted by this. And what we need to do is to get Ohio reopened as quickly as possible, making sure that people are getting back to work safely and making sure that our kids are getting back to school. I mean, to me, that is number one priority that we have to accomplish. And it's not gonna be easy. We gotta figure out a way to learn to live with the virus. It's gonna be here. It's gonna be a while till we have a vaccine. But we gotta be able to make sure that we have the tools and resources in place for our businesses, our families, and our schools so that they can live with the virus and be able to be safe. And I think that is job number one that the state has to do. Get reopened, get people back to work, get people back in school, make sure that we're moving Ohio forward.
Thank you. And over to Jessica.
Thank you, Hunter. Well, as moms, the highest priority is the health and safety of our children, and I fully believe that every day that I serve as the state representative here for the Great 28. We have lost over 200,000 people, which is an absolute tragedy in and of itself. This pandemic was mishandled from the beginning, but I am proud of the early decisions of Dr. Amy Acton and Governor DeWine that they made those decisions to mitigate this crisis. The three biggest issues facing this district, of course, is keeping our economy stable and bringing it back stronger than before after COVID, making sure that our businesses, our local governments, our schools, and everywhere in between have the state and federal funding they need to operate during this pandemic. Because small businesses, micro businesses are hurting right now, and I know that firsthand as a small business owner. Secondly, education is so very important. I thoroughly believe in the fibers of my being that education is the surefire way to get up and out of poverty. I am living proof of that. I had an awesome public education, proud product of public schools, and that has made me enroll my children in our amazing public schools here in the Great 28, and I'm so very proud of that. And then third, of course, is ensuring that we have good paying jobs here in the Great 28. Not just any jobs, but good paying jobs that the people deserve here in the Great 28, which I am very, very proud as state representative to have made and brought to the district and attracted a record number of those within my first year and 9 months in office.
All right, and listeners, now we're going to turn it over to some of your questions. So first up, I have a question from Standish from Sycamore and Bill from Montgomery. They both asked about House Bill 6, which included a bailout for nuclear and coal power plants. House Bill 6 has come under scrutiny since former House Speaker, Republican Larry Householder, was arrested for an alleged bribery scandal to pass legislation. Do you think that House Bill 6 should be repealed? This time we'll start with you, Jessica.
Thank you. Absolutely, I do think House Bill 6 should be repealed. I am signed on as a sponsor for both the Republican version of the repeal bill and the Democratic version of the repeal bill. It couldn't happen soon enough. We were hopeful that it was going to happen before this election season, but that is the problem with decades and decades of a one-party rule here in Ohio, which has resulted in corruption to the likes no one has ever seen before. And I am proud that every decision I make at the State House is careful carefully weighed based on what is best for the constituents here in the Great 28. This allows me to legislate with integrity and avoid situations like we have seen with House Bill 6. Situations like this where dark money compromise politicians and dismantle the public's trust in our government process and political process. So this is precisely why we need to keep this seat and continue to clean up Columbus, to balance our budget, to repeal House Bill 6, and restore all of the clean and renewable energy measures that were in House Bill 6 that got taken out because we simply don't have the votes. We have a one-party rule in Columbus. We're very lopsided. Us Democrats are in super minority, and we cannot get anything done with the numbers we have. So I am proud to be there working for the Great 28 to make our government balanced and keep corruption and bribery out of our state capitol and repeal House Bill 6.
Thank you, Jessica. Now over to you, Chris.
So I too believe that House Bill 6 needs to be redone. That is tainted with bribery scandal. I think that, as I said earlier, unfortunately, my opponent did not even show up for the last vote on House Bill 6, something that was so important and so critical to our community, and not to have a voice there. That Forest Park didn't have a voice, Green Hills didn't have a voice, Springfield Township didn't have a voice. None of our communities had a voice in that final vote, which to me is critical. That's doing your job. That's showing up to make sure that you're representing us for such an important vote. And I think also, given the current political climate that we're in, which has unfortunately become too uncivil, and often, on both sides of the aisle, and it's unfortunate too that I've been receiving these mailers that probably people have seen that imply that I'm involved with the House Bill 6 bribery scandal. Which is not the truth whatsoever. In fact, Jessica, I hope you would tell people tonight that it's not true, that I wasn't even there, and ironically that you were, and I had nothing to do with it, but they've been sent out by the Ohio Democratic Party stating that I was involved with this bribery scandal, which is so not true. To me, that's not right, and to see that, and especially when you look at how Speaker Hauser got into power. If you look at just the record of who voted, he was overwhelmingly supported by Democrats in the Democratic caucus. In fact, the former minority leader, Representative Strayhorn, said that, ironically, the majority of Democratic caucus voted for Larry Householder, not the Republicans. They voted for Ryan Smith. So from when you look at it, to me, I think this is an opportunity for us to, go forward, make sure that we have a bill that is not tainted and that is going forward, that makes common sense of what we should be doing for our energy in here in Ohio and keeping our rates as low as possible for our users. But to me, to see this type of, mailers going around is really disappointing, considering I had nothing to do with it.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on. Another listener question. This is from Michael from Sharonville, who asks, could you clarify your position on the organization Black Lives Matter? How familiar are you with the Black Lives Matter as an organization versus a concept? Chris, it's your turn to begin.
So I believe truly that Black Lives Matter, and they do. To me, actions speak louder than words. And if you look at my actions in regards to respecting Black life, I've been involved with working with former County Commissioner Todd Fortune to create the Cradle Cincinnati, which was the infant mortality task force, where we were working on trying to reduce the infant mortality rate in Hamilton County. Infant mortality is when a baby doesn't live past the first year of its life. It dies before its first birthday. And with that bipartisan effort, we got a group together and created Cradle Cincinnati, where within the first 5 years, we reduced the infant mortality rate in Hamilton County by 15%. And just in the last year, we reduced the infant mortality for black babies by 24%. Just huge improvement. To me, I think that's important, of looking at actions and not just words. And unfortunately, I think what has happened with the movement, which I do not support, I think the organization is very bad, and what we've seen across this country with the destruction in our communities is not what peaceful protesting is about at all. And I think it's just being recognized of what that group is doing to our country and tearing it apart in cities like Seattle and Chicago and Portland. That is not what people think of when they think of peaceful protesting. And I think, unfortunately, that has been now put into Black lives, and where we think should be looking at the message of really valuing Black lives. We're actually now being torn apart because of all the violent protesting that's destroying our communities. So to me, I do not support that at all, but I do support my actions in making sure that we protect as many Black lives as possible within our community.
Thank you, Chris. Now over to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Hunter. First and foremost, Black Lives Matter, period. It is not the movement and the organization itself that is dismantling our communities and bringing rioting and looting and all of that stuff that my opponent refers to in these peaceful protests. Folks need to use and exercise their First Amendment right to be heard. And the fact of the matter is that brutality, abuse of power, have no place in our criminal justice system, and they have no place in all of our policies and legislation that we have here in our county, here in our state, on our school boards, in our school districts, all the way up to the White House and everywhere in between. The problem is systemic racism throughout our policy. I'll give you a perfect example, and I cannot take credit for this because it was my colleague, Stephanie House, Representative Stephanie House, who is the president of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, who said this when we were on the floor in Columbus until 2:00 a.m. one evening, debating whether or not the Confederate flag should be sold at our state and county fairs. She said, "The state of Ohio was founded in the year 1803. The first black legislator, lawmaker, representative wasn't elected to our state house until 75 years later." If you think about that, we had 75 years to put in place the foundation of laws that were not made for Black Americans, Ohioans. They were not made for brown Americans, brown Ohioans, and surely not the Asian community, the American Indian community, et cetera, et cetera. We have a long way to go to fix the foundation of policymaking here in Ohio, throughout our state, in our county, and right here in our municipalities to make sure that abuse of power, brutality has no place in any of our cities.
Well, we are moving through our 25-minute time slot really quickly. I will take one quick moment to say if you're watching this live on October 1st, you can email in your question to me right here on this iPad in the studio at live@waycross.org. I have one more email in here also. We have questions of our own to ask you, but let's see if the emails let us get to them. I have a question here let me get my little buttons pressed right here. I have a question here from Shannon from Blue Ash. And Shannon asks, what do you plan to do to protect the medical freedom of all Ohioans during the pandemic and after? Why don't I, it's a longer question, but I think we're gonna get really tight. So I think we're gonna focus it on that's the main part of our question. So we will start with you, Jessica, and we will have 2 minutes to answer this question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dana. So protecting the medical freedom, it's an interesting question, almost feels like a plant, but I will just say I am 100% for affordable access to health care, no matter what your zip code, no matter what your race, and no matter what your social economic status in this state. Everyone should have affordable access to health care, to good health care. And I believe thoroughly when we get through this pandemic stronger than before, we will have the opportunity to have a vaccine for COVID-19. And we will have to think about that. So many people in places of leadership will have to think about that vaccine in and of itself, right? What are we going to do with students in classrooms? Are we going to make that vaccine, mandatory for students to come back to schools, for students to go back to their college campuses, for people to go back to work and everywhere in between? And I think when you start talking about medical freedom and vaccinations, that's a real conversation we have to sit down and have as a state to think about what is the best way to move forward to protect everyone's safety and to ensure equal affordable access to health care here in this state. And I'm proud of the policies that I'm working on at the State House, especially the bills that we're working on to lower prescription costs, because everyone knows that that is a pandemic of itself here in our country and in our state. We have to get those costs under control so our seniors and everyone else can afford their medicine that is life-saving. Thank you.
All right, now, Chris, your turn.
Oh, thank you. For medical freedom, I think it's important from a standpoint, and I think from a society in Ohio in general, that our citizens should be able to have the freedom to choose what they want to do in regards to the medicine that they receive. And I think now, especially with the coronavirus and with the potential vaccine, that people, probably don't want to go out there and get forced to go take a vaccine. that they don't want to take because they haven't seen if it's been tested or if it's even effective, and they don't want to harm themselves. So I think as a government, we need to make sure that we protect that medical freedom so that individuals have that responsibility and that right to determine whether or not they want to get that shot, and also in regards to their families and their children and how they want to handle that. And to me, I think that's just something that's based on personal responsibility and accountability and freedom and liberty, which is the basis of what our country has been founded on, is that principle of individual responsibility and making sure that we have the freedom and liberty to make those decisions that affect our personal lives and our families. And I think as a state representative, I will fight for that. I will fight to make sure that our families that have those opportunities to make sure they can make those decisions and that their freedoms are protected. Because I think at times we see government coming in trying to take different parts of our lives and be in charge of them, and especially we've seen that now for the last 6 months with the pandemic and how involved in the daily lives from our schools and our healthcare to our seniors. To me, I think it's important that we remember that our country is founded on individual liberty and making sure that our citizens are protected and have those freedom to make those choices.
We are going through these questions so quickly, and we're still not going to be able to answer all the get to all the questions. And there are, quite honestly, several more topics that we wanted to make sure we got to, but fortunately we did get to most of the actual emails that came in. I do want to take a minute to see if you each have a 1-minute closing statement that you would like to make. And we will start with you, Chris.
Okay, well, great. Well, Dana, Hunter, and everyone here at Waycross Media, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to give us tonight to be able to share our visions and our thoughts on what we think a state representative for District 28 should be and how they represent our communities up in Columbus. You know, to me, this choice in this election is clear. You know, my opponent has stated positions tonight that are opposite of where I'm at. You know, she has stated positions of supporting organizations that are against our police. To her, blue lives don't exist. And in a time when our state is facing one of the worst public health and economic crises in generations, Jessica Miranda was a no-show for the most corrupt $6 billion vote in Ohio history. She let us down. Our communities in District 28 had no voice. We deserve better. I ask for your vote. I will support our police. I will show up, and I will get things done. Thank you.
All right, and Jessica?
Thank you, Dana, and thanks Waycross and Hunter and everyone else again. And I will just say, before I begin my closing statement, the voters should know that I am the daughter of a fallen police officer. My stepdad, before his untimely death, was a deputy sheriff for the Butler County Sheriff's Department. So for him to come on this program and spew falsities, lies right out of his mouth is just incomprehensible. This year, we are clearly at a crossroads, up and down the ballot, and particularly in this race. As your state representative, I promise that a vote for me is a vote for progress, equality, and transparency. In 2021, we need to recover from this pandemic and find ways to fully fund healthcare, education, and our local governments. We have to bring our tax money back home where it belongs. We also have the opportunity to end gerrymandering, draw fair maps, and move forward from this pandemic stronger than before. I consider myself a public servant, not a politician. I work for you. Please visit jessicaforohio.com to learn all the facts, and I thank you so much for listening tonight.
All right. Thank you so much. We have gone very quickly. We haven't even begun to touch all of the things that Hunter and I had to ask you, but I want to thank you so much for coming in. I would also like to thank you for watching, because that means you want to be an informed voter when you get your ballot. If you need more information before you vote in the upcoming election, you can watch all of our election programs at www.waycross.tv. You can also go to the Board of Elections website, votehamiltoncounty.org. Find everything you need to know about registering, early voting, where do you vote, and what's on your ballot. It's all at that website. Make sure you vote on November 3rd if you're going in person. Early voting starts October 6th. Mm-hmm. I'm Dana Gagnon, the Waycross Government Programming Coordinator. I'm here with Hunter, and we will see you at the polls on November 3rd.
Waycross takes no position on candidates or issues. We conduct these forums so that our viewers may be better informed voters for the November 3rd elections.